Every great company has an origin story, but Palantir's is one of the most interesting and most misunderstood stories in all of tech. Today, I'm going to show you the true behind-the-scenes story of how Palantir was built, as told by one of his co-founders, Joe Lonsdale. We're going to watch his amazing interview and learn about the geniuses who built the company, their strategy for taking on broken industries, and the funny, messy reality of their early startup days. Let's get into it.
Let's build that story up until at par. The first day you're at Palantir, you start working with Teal, Karp, and others. And
Karp wasn't there the first day, but he was a critical founder. Yeah.
Touch a bit on those things you built internally, what it was like working with them, and then the build up to, okay, I am going to start at par.
I always want to be careful talking about the very start of Palantir, because I was like the founder who was driving it early on, but it wouldn't have worked without Stefan, my roommate, who was actually also founder driving early on. It wouldn't have worked without Peter's support. If we hadn't gotten Karp to come in and at first pretend to be CEO, but then actually be CEO, it wouldn't have worked. And there's lots of wisdom he's had that's made it much bigger. Frankly, it's not just, it's like I mentioned Aki earlier. If it wasn't for Sham and Aki and Bob McGrew, who was my fraternity, went on to OpenAI, the company just wouldn't have been nearly as big and nearly as successful. So it is one of those things where it's like, I'm really proud of having hired the first couple hundred people and being in charge of a lot of things the first 5 years. But I think the real interesting story is that it's one of those things that actually took the combined work of just a lot of amazing people. And then frankly, something they have, which I didn't contribute to, is the persistence for them to keep building and keep taking advantage of opportunity. It's just amazing. I used to get in trouble because I'd give offers where I'd give different sizes the company could be, and the high size, back in 2005, was 5 billion, and people would yell at me and say, that's ridiculous. It's not gonna be 5 billion. I'm like, no, I think this is how we could get there over the next several years. And it was kind of ridiculous at that time. Back then, that was nothing new gets like that. And so but I never imagined it'd be whatever it is, $400 billion market cap. It's amazing. I'm so proud of this team. And I did put them in place. I can't take credit for their work though. It's pretty amazing.
I personally love how this interview starts because it immediately shows you why Palantir's culture is so different from other tech companies. Joe Lonsdale, a key founder, instantly gives all the credit to the rest of his team. Alex Karp, Peter Thiel, and all the other brilliant minds who were there. In Silicon Valley, we're so used to the mythical lone geniuses, the one celebrity founder who supposedly did everything, but Joe is doing the exact opposite. He's making it clear that Palantir wasn't built by one person. And I think this is more than just him being humble, it's a secret to Palantir's success. When you create a culture where it's all about the team and the mission, you attract the best people and you can solve problems that are impossible for anyone to solve alone. Even this story about the valuation proves this. Joe's wildest dreams back in the day were a $5 billion valuation, and it's become a $400 billion company. This shows that the main goal wasn't just to get rich, they were obsessed with solving really hard problems. And the incredible success and massive valuation came as a result of their focus.
You were essentially a bunch of Stanford kids running around going up against the government. People must...
Well, in theory, we're trying to work with the government.
Yeah. Work with them.
Going up against the primes, maybe, is what you want to say. Which are kind of like the government, though, you're right.
Sure. Yeah. But I think there's a lot of pushback. You're quite young and you're trying to do this thing in a very regulated field. This has also been a consistent theme. Regulation, that you kind of go towards archaic industries, but that was your first attempt at it at a very young age.
Yeah, well,
what was that like?
Well, it was very frustrating for quite a while. You had to be really persistent. And the idea is the reason some of these regulated industries, and I've built in lots of different areas, but quite a few of them have been regulated. The reason they're interesting to build in is because they're so broken. I think this is a really important point. Because these things are artificially protected and skewed and if you can actually get in and have competent people, it's you just win because you're just 10 times better and you shame everyone. And that's what we did. It just took a long time because there weren't the past. It was all set up to be crony and to only support the existing things there. So you had to just consistently keep building allies. Every once in a while, you'd find some ally who had honor and wanted to push for you. Joe Felter, who I still know at Stanford today, in 2005 was deployed in Iraq in 2005, 2006, and he had honor and he wanted the best solution to save the lives of his comrades. And he pushed to bring it in at the time and along with others there. And it only worked because of people like him who there are these diamonds in the rough who are willing to go around the system and cause trouble to ask for the right things,
This is the core of Palantir's secret strategy, and it's so clever. Why did they decide to go into the toughest and most difficult industries like defense? Because, as Joe says, those industries were so broken. They were filled with old, slow companies that were protected by special deals. Palantir's plan was simple but brilliant. Show up with a product that is 10 times better and completely shame everyone with how good it is. Palantir knew it would be a long and hard fight, but they also knew that if they could just find a few good people inside the system who cared about the mission more than the old rules, they could win. And that's exactly what they did.
And so you can win. And you really, if it wasn't for both Palantir and SpaceX, though, which each had to push insanely hard, each had to do all these unnatural acts, each had to eventually sue the government, then you wouldn't have kind of made that new path. I think Palantir and SpaceX made that new path, and it took us a long time. And then I think Anduril's obviously driven through and made the path even stronger. And now you actually do get a lot more. It's still really hard. People underestimate how hard it is and how hard it is to build a team in DC, but it is at least not as hard as it was.
When did you really feel it was clicking? You had this thesis about the world, it was regulated, and then things kind of started working.
It's really hard to put it. There was definitely a time when it really wasn't working, where we'd have a bunch of things fall apart in year 3, and a bunch of the guys, some people I mentioned, not all of them, threatened to quit. They're gonna quit, and I had to convince them, please stay for 6 more months, and just all these, it's really interesting. And then we got some big contracts to come through, and kind of everyone stayed, and it worked. But I mean, the first time, one of the early trips to DC, I remember, you get a rental car, which I haven't got one of those in a while. I got a rental car. And then you drive to the address of the hotel, and it turned out, I didn't know that DC had Southwest versus Northeast. Do you know this? They have the same addresses, but they're labeled with different the letters. And so I'm in this African-American part of town, and this very nice black guy is like, what the hell are you boys doing here? You're in danger. They're the nerdiest guys with our big laptop cases. And it's and I just remember no idea what I was doing in this town. And you had people trying to help you. And it's very funny. It's you had to kiss a lot of frogs, in the sense that you had to just work with a lot of different people, not knowing who actually has the ability to make things happen and do things. There's just so many things, and knowing how it works now, it's just so different than obviously what we did. We just had no idea what we were doing, but we just were persistent and kept talking to people, kept impressing them, kept finding people with problems, kept solving the problems and impressing them. Eventually George Tenet was really helpful early on. He had left the CIA after running it under both Bush and Clinton. He basically figured out, one of the things we had to do was just really get an analyst groundswell. So we knew, here's a bunch of these analysts who need this, and if you solve their problems and they all demand it, and we amplify that, that's going to help us with this group over here. So he really helped with some of the strategy, and other people, because there's so many people who say they can help who don't know how to do it. It's funny though, there's all these conspiracies online now about how this was a CIA technology. It was not a CIA technology, nor were they helping us. It was disaster. It was so painful. It's just so funny because for the first several years of this, it's just so hard, and you're doing all your best you can, and you're literally building it out of our own creative minds and iterating to figure out how the best technology could be helping the government. And then you have this guys online where it's there's conspiracy theorists who millions of people follow, who it's yeah, and then they took the CIA technology and they took credit for it and they made money from it. I'm good God, guys. Not what happened. But anyway, it's fine. I guess they shouldn't protest against crazy things. But it's just, it's very funny how the stories afterwards. It's just one of those things where we didn't know what we were doing, but we did have some of the best engineers in the world, and we had a lot of persistence.
I must admit, I thoroughly enjoyed that last section. Joe talks about all the crazy conspiracies that you can find online, saying that Palantir was some secret CIA project that was handed to them. And of course, Joe just laughs. Joe says that in reality, it was a disaster and so painful at times. Joe tells stories about being a nerdy kid with a big laptop case getting lost in Washington, DC, having no idea what he was doing. That wasn't some secret government plot. This was the real, messy, and difficult story of a startup built by brilliant engineers who were just super persistent and refused to give up. That is the real origin story, and it's actually much more inspiring. Palantir's success wasn't a mystery or a conspiracy. It was the result of a brilliant team with a great strategy and a bunch of engineers who simply refused to quit. If you found this video of any value whatsoever, why not consider hitting subscribe? Cheers.